We're going to look at a very sad chapter. I was wondering, why did God put this chapter in the Bible? They wanted a king, so they got one. And what a mess. And you know, this was a warning for Israel, because they clamored for a king in the time of Samuel. And God said, they didn't reject you, Samuel, as a judge, they rejected me. And here Israel had exposure to what happens if you appoint a king. God's plan was to use judges, and every tribe would get a judge. So this would be very fair. So they got a king, and what a mess. It is so sad. Please don't be like those around you. They wanted to be like the other kingdoms. They paid a tremendous price. And eventually they were exiled. Let's look at this chapter. The tragic story of Abimelech. One wrong choice can destroy one's life. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, now listen what he wants to tell them. Please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. Which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Referring to himself. Remember that I am your own flesh and bone. I'm one of you. You know me. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. And their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. The citizens of Shechem was from the tribe of Ephraim, and Gideon from Manasseh. They preferred Abimelech on the basis that he was one of them, one of their tribe. Was God involved in this illegal, disastrous choice? And our choices, do you ask God, please help me? I've got to make a decision. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. His father Gideon detested Baal worship, and now his son's wicked career was financed from money of a Baal temple. This was a bad beginning. Gideon's polygamy did not produce very good, edible, tasty fruit. This son of Gideon used the 70 shekels of silver to finance the massacre of his 70 brothers. What a disastrous story. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, left because he hid himself. On my previous visits to the ruins of Ophrah, I saw evidences of blood, and I was wondering why so much blood was shed here. What do you notice? There's a lamb. This wicked Abimelech slaughtered his brothers as did these modern inhabitants slaughtered this sheep. When I was here, the ladies got hysteric to see a lamb slain. And can you imagine sacrificing 70 sons? It could have happened at the same spot where Gideon sacrificed to the angel of the Lord some time ago. How long would God and the citizens of Shechem tolerate this wicked son? In Hebrew, the name Jotham, Gideon's youngest son, means God is perfect. The fact that he gave his 70th son, Jotham, this name, God is perfect, is evidence that he acknowledged God's perfection and discarding the imperfection of the false Epod worship that he started. Let's continue the story of this gruesome, cruel Abimelech. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the Terebinth Tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. This tree could be the same one where Jacob's household buried their idols and earrings and their jewelry. Abimelech was enthroned at the site where Joshua renewed the covenant between the people of God for the last time. You know, to crown him king here, this is sacrilege of the worst kind. Camera crew filming the famous stone of Joshua where Abimelech was crowned as king of Shechem. This was contrary to God's will. What is Jotham going to do about this crime? This is the youngest brother. You know, when I stood next to this stone, the story of Abimelech came to me. He was crowned here after he killed his brothers. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, "Listen to me, ye men, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you." Now he was the only son of Gideon that escaped the slaughter of Abimelech. Listen to his prophetic utterances. And at the conclusion of this lecture, you will see the fulfillment of what he prophesied. This is an interesting way of using personification, making trees as if they were people. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, "Reign over us." So they first came to Gideon, "Please reign over us." This is the second attempt to appoint a king over the tribes of Gideon after he declined. They persisted and only succeeded during the time of Samuel when Saul was made king. So this is a very interesting chapter to remember. The olive, fig and vine trees represented people like Gideon, who was interested in the welfare of the people and not in self-enrichment. So some of the other brothers also refused kingship because they were interested in the interest of the people. But the olive tree said to them, "Should I cease giving my oil, with which they honor God and men, and go to sway over trees?" To be king is very selfish. And these other brothers, they wanted to serve the people, not themselves. Then the tree said to the fig tree, "You come and reign over us." It seems that some of Gideon's other sons were also approached, as I mentioned, to reign as king over the people of Shechem. But they too, like their father, refused the honor. It was against God's will. But the fig tree said to them, "Should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over trees?" Then the trees said to the vine, "You come and reign over us." Jotham hints that Gideon was fully aware of the unstable, changeable nature of Israel. He would rather be a judge than a king who lorded over the people. What are the trees going to do now? Then all the trees said to the bramble, it sounds bad, the pronunciation, bramble, "You come and reign over us." And the bramble, that's not Abimelech, said to the trees, "If in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon." That fire came out a little later. What a contrast between the valuable trees and the bramble. Bramble. Now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have risen up against my father's house this day. So this is Jotham speaking from the adjacent mountain. And killed his 70 sons on one stone. Oh, must have been gruesome. And made Abimelech the son of his female servant, concubine, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. And killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech the sons of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. That's the only reason why you make him king. Mount Gerizim, from where Jotham addressed the people of Shechem. Jotham said that those who want to make Abimelech their king would neither receive protection nor shade. Maybe he was a kind of a prophet. I think so. Should they turn against him, he would destroy them. So he warned them. This was a prophetic warning. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, but sarcastic, and let him also rejoice in you. Sarcasm. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo, and devour Abimelech. This prediction, my dear friend, was fulfilled. Fire devoured both parties, Abimelech and the people of Shechem. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there, for fear of Abimelech, his brother. How long did the bramble rule? That's the wicked Abimelech, the new king. After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, that was even too long, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. That the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem who aided him in the killing of his brothers. What God allows is often portrayed as if he initiated and caused it. This is a Hebrew style of writing. The way Abimelech treated the sons of Gideon is the manner in which his supporters treated him. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains. And they robbed all who possessed by them along the way, and it was told Abimelech. The bramble was going to lose this looming battle. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. So if they lost their confidence in Abimelech, and they put it on a stranger. So they went out in the fields and gathered grapes, and from their vineyards, and trod them, and made merry. And they went into the house of their God, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. First they kissed him, now they cursed him. In the very same temple from which they financed Abimelech, he's now being cursed. Then Gaal the son of Ebed said, Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal? And is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? In the very same temple from which they financed Abimelech, as I mentioned, is now cursed. If only the people were under my authority, then I would remove Abimelech. So he said to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. He's a bit arrogant. When Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was aroused. What was Zebul now going to do? So he's not in favor of another wicked ruler. And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly saying, take note, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and here they are, fortifying the city against you. Now therefore, get up by night, as I read, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field, and it shall be as soon as the sun is up in the morning, that you shall rise early and rush upon the city, and when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may then do to them as you find opportunity. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him arose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. When Gaal the son of Ebed went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, you see the shadows of the mountains as if they were men. During the night, Abimelech's forces had come as near to the city as they could without causing alarm. In the early morning, after the gates were opened, and many of the people had gone out of the walls to their fields, Abimelech's soldiers began to advance upon the city. Now Gaal immediately detected them and excitedly shouted the information to Zebul in order to gain time for Abimelech, leisurely going out to look and then replying with deceit and mockery, you see shadows of the mountains as if they were men. Ruins of the city gate of Shechem where Gaal and Zebul chatted. Gaal immediately detected them and excitedly shouted the information to Zebul in order to gain time for Abimelech, leisurely going out to look and then replying with deceit and mockery, you see shadows of the mountains as if they were men. It could be that Gaal suffered a little from the hangover of the previous night of drinking alcohol. So he thought he would be the next ruler. No, God had another plan. Our plans don't work out so well. So Gaal spoke again and said, see, people are coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the Diviners Terebinth Tree, from all points, commanding the avenues of the city. Troops of Abimelech's soldiers advanced, and the consternation of Gaal and the surprise of the citizens. Then Zebul said to him, where indeed is your mouth now, with which you said, who is Abimelech, that we should serve him, and not these people whom you despised? Are not these people whom you despised? Go out, if you will, and fight with them now. Insolent, boastful men are often made to change their rash attitude in a brief time, like Gaal, and the dread of those whom they have previously insulted. So Gaal went out, leading the men of Shechem, and fought with Abimelech, and Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. This is a very bad story, sad story. Then Abimelech dwelt at Arumah, And Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers, so that they would not dwell in Shechem. And it came about on the next day that the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. So he took his people, divided them in 3 companies, like Gideon did, and lay in wait in the field. And he looked, and there were people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city. And the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and killed them. The king they chose killed them. Don't let the king you choose kill you. So Abimelech fought against the city all that day. And he took the city and killed the people who were in it. And he demolished the city and sowed it with salt. The results of choosing your king. Then Abimelech sprinkled salt over the ruins in symbolic action to express the wish that it might be barren and uninhabited forever. This is a very interesting story of how Shechem was rebuilt. But that's a story for another time. The runes remember the day when Abimelech burned Shechem to ashes. This was a warning to the 10 tribes that asking for a king can end up in ruins and disaster. At times we want to be like the world. But the world is not a loving place. It is a disastrous place. Stay with God. You're safe with Him. Now when all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold of the temple of the god Berith. In antiquity, temples were regarded as places of asylum. Abimelech, that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. Then Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him. And it was told, "What you have seen me do, make haste and do as I have done." So each of the people likewise cut down his own bow and followed Abimelech, put them against the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire above them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. This was a literal fulfillment of Jotham's prophecy. Fire had gone forth from the bramble king and destroyed the people of Shechem. How sad. Then Abimelech went to Thebes, and he encamped against Thebes and took it. But there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and women, all the people of the city fled there and shut themselves in. Then they went up to the top of the tower. Towers like this have been found in Palestine with stone walls as much as 14 feet thick. So they thought they would be safe here. There were floors of stories within the tower with a platform on top from which to defend it. Into the last formidable citadel, the citizens of Thebes fled after Abimelech had broken through their city walls. So Abimelech came as far as the tower and fought against it, and he drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. When the defenders resisted his furious attacks, Abimelech tried to set the wooden door on fire. If he had succeeded in burning the door down, his men could have successfully stormed the tower. And now for the last act of the man who wanted to rule as king. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. And now we read of the last desperate act of the bramble who wanted to rule. We're not called to rule, but to serve. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed him." So the young man thrust him through, and he died. The first man who sought to exercise kingship over Israel, and the first real king of Israel, which was Saul, sought to die similarly. Saul also asked his armor-bearer to kill him, like Abimelech. This should have been a warning to Israel, who wanted to have a king like all the other nations. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man to his place. The death of a leader was generally sufficient to break up and scatter an ancient army. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father, by killing his 70 brothers. These words give the moral of the whole current of the whole account. The writer of this book felt deeply that God controlled the events of history, punishing both individuals and nations, their crimes. The murderer of the sons of Gideon upon one stone is killed by a stone striking his head, whereas the wicked Shechemites, who used temple money to hire assassins of good men, were burned to death. In that same temple, by the one they aided in the deed, the curse of Jotham had been completely fulfilled. And all the evil of the men of Shechem God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. Photo of Tel Balata from the air. Listen to the following serious statement. Principle, not policy, must control. Had the Israelites preserved a clear perception of right and wrong, they would have seen that the fallacy of Abimelech's reasoning and the injustice of his claims. They would have seen that he was filled with envy and actuated by a base ambition to exalt himself by the ruin of his brethren. Those who are controlled by policy rather than by principle are not to be trusted. This is very serious. They will pervert the truth, conceal facts, and construe the words of others to mean that which was never intended. They will employ flattering words while the poison of asps are under their tongues. He who does not earnestly seek the divine guidance will be deceived by the smooth words of their artful plans. My friend, may God be merciful upon you and me. Father in heaven, what a sad account of a wrong choice. They wanted to have a king like the other nations, and their choice caused their death. Help us not to be like the other nations. Help us to be humble servants, trusting and obeying you. In Jesus' name, Amen. Thank you for watching this presentation. To subscribe to our channel, click here, then click the bell to get notifications. For the next presentation, click here. See you next time.